everybody. Happy Friday, happy Juneteenth, and thank you for checking out this conversation. Welcome to those that are checking us out live on Facebook and those that are following us after the fact. We really appreciate it. Today I have an opportunity to have a conversation with two amazing people that live here in Pittsburgh and do a lot of really cool work. Excited to have this opportunity to dig deeper into what they do and also bring attention to a lot of great activity that's happening in our region, resources, thoughts on community, and things like that. My name is Josiah Gilliam. I work for the city of Pittsburgh in the mayor's office, and I run the My Brother's Keeper initiative, which is Black men and boys focused, but it's collective impact. And a lot of what we try to do is highlight work that happens in the community and participate in community weaving functions. Doing that work in a place like Pittsburgh means that you're often finding out about cool stuff, and you just have to point to it. That's about as simple as it gets to be. And I think that'll become very clear as you get to know the two guests that we have today. So without further ado, I'd like to let them introduce themselves and then get right into the conversation, starting with Ms. Khamil.
Okay, so I am Khamil Scantling, founder of Cocopreneur PGH LLC, a Black business consultancy and advocacy business. The work that I do is mostly centered around the Black business directory called the Cocopreneur directory that features Black-owned businesses in the greater Pittsburgh area. I think that kind of sums it up.
Thank you very much. And Ms. Sam.
My name is Samantha Black. I'm the CEO of Silo PGH, and I work around our arts, culture, socioeconomics, making sure that Black people in Pittsburgh, specifically Black artists and creatives, entrepreneurs, have the spaces in which to expand, maintain, or create.
Wonderful. So we're going to have a chance to dig into the work that you each do and its history. But today's special. Today is not just Friday, but it's also Juneteenth. And it's a special moment to recognize and acknowledge history. And certainly, I don't know about you two, but I've been seeing a lot of folks sharing out information about this. There seems to be an awakening around what this holiday means and what it's about. So Khamil, if you wouldn't mind, could you just speak to the history of Juneteenth and its significance as a day and as a holiday?
Yeah, so Juneteenth is basically the combination of June and 19th, which is the day in 1865 when folks in Galveston, Texas, were actually brought the news and the enforcement that slavery was ending and all enslaved people were to be free. This is actually 2.5 years after Emancipation Proclamation was actually signed. So this was a huge slap in the face to the actual inaction of enforcing the Emancipation Proclamation. So in January of 1863, when the Emancipation Proclamation was actually signed by Abraham Lincoln, the Civil War was still going on. And while it was a declaration to free all enslaved people in Confederate states, because the war was still going on, many people took their time to actually free their enslaved folks. So not only was it Galveston, Texas, but just across the South in the Confederacy, people took their time actually freeing enslaved people. So this is actually something that you kind of see going forward even to today. While there might be, laws on the books or common practices, some Americans do what they want because they can. With Juneteenth, the way it is celebrated, it started in Galveston, Texas, because that was kind of the final act of emancipation. It started there and kind of branched out. It started to get more popular in the 1950s and 60s during the Civil Rights Movement, when people started to look for more ways to express their Black pride. Juneteenth became a lot more popular then. So we see that happening again around the late 80s, when again, people are starting to kind of find this empowerment in their Blackness. We see it happening again now. And it just seems like every time something tragic happens to us, we have to find ways to promote our Blackness and to care and love ourselves the way we should. So Juneteenth is this celebration of our history. It's a celebration of our culture. It's a celebration of our endurance being here in America, where we are oftentimes mistreated. So that is the history of Juneteenth. It's very dark, but still celebratory because we're still here.
it's dark in a very interestingly unique way, because as you point out, there's this Emancipation Proclamation. That's what folks most often, at least up until now, point to, as the moment where the federal government, President Lincoln is saying the slaves are free. But Juneteenth commemorates the time when slaves in Galveston and Texas were made aware of this. And so even though legally speaking they were free, that information was withheld from them. Right. And there's all kinds of associated stories about attempts to make that known and folks getting murdered and it getting, right. The message getting derailed and stuff like that. And it speaks, I think, too, to this idea of freedom as a mentality and related to access to information. Do you have any thoughts around that and how it relates to what we think about today?
There's a few things. So with that, right, when we talk about people's minds, there's only so much you can do to enforce a rule. So even if they knew it, there's nothing they could do to actually enforce the law being upheld, right? It took a general writing down and enforcing that law. So that's part of like this allyship that people talk about now, right? So we can do as much as we can as Black people to fight systems of oppression, but it does take everybody. And it takes people actually jumping in and saying, we know this isn't right. We're not going to be able to do it alone. It's going to take the entire system. Also realizing that even the Emancipation Proclamation, and I think this is going to be relevant later on in the conversation, was more about economics than anything else. It wasn't about humanity. It wasn't about freeing enslaved people because it's the wrong thing to do. It's just that, the North was not going to be able to keep their economic power over the South if the South was able to maintain enslaved people because their labor was free. And that's really what Emancipation Proclamation was about. And I think that that's a very relevant point to what we're talking about today, even in context of everything that's happening with the Buy Black movements that are kind of being pushed right now, and this idea of revitalizing Black communities.
Thank you. And Sam, I wonder how you describe the history of Juneteenth to folks, and I'd also like to hear from you too on what the local relevance is for folks that celebrate Juneteenth and what happens here in Pittsburgh.
So I think it's important to note that there hasn't been much change in the way of Black bodies being enslaved for America's profit, right? So a lot of the times people are just like, well, slavery's over, let's get past that and let's talk about how we move forward, when in actuality, there are a lot of Black bodies that are enslaved within the prison system. A lot of brands make their money off the free labor of prisoners who are predominantly Black and brown, right? So Juneteenth is not history. It's actually, it's current, right? Like that is currently happening, where people are fighting for the freedom of Black and brown bodies to not be the economic backbone of the country. And the only reason that they are fighting back is because the only reason that the system is fighting back is because the system cannot function without slavery, right? It is designed to be economically successful because of the labor of people within a certain system. And we're talking about the judicial system, the prison system. So whenever, Khamil is mentioning this kind of, nobody is fighting for the humanity of Black people. Like, I want that to be clear, right? They are fighting for their economic power. They are fighting they're fighting against, reform simply because they cannot make money off free people. They cannot make money by giving you property. They cannot make money by giving you anything, because then they lose. Right? Then they lose what it is that they are. They lose all their foundation. They lose their economic power. And I think it's interesting for people to recognize that historically, the North and the South were the same. There were the same racists in the North and the South, right? It was not about who cared more about Black people. It was who wants to profit more off of Black bodies. And you see that currently, even in pop culture, whenever, there are people who make it to a certain level. They utilize Black culture to make their money first. And then they go back and say, hey, well, I don't really believe in this culture because this culture is like demeaning or something like that. Like they make their money from Black people, and then they toss Black people out whenever they are at a certain level where they don't need it anymore.
Mm-hmm. So this is an interesting discussion too, because there's this contrast of, to your point, systems and structures of power, and then in many cases economic power, and then back down to the community and individual level of agency. And I wondered if you wouldn't mind, because you two have been some of the most active in this space, talking about Greenwood Week and why the purpose of it and the name and its significance. And then I'd like to talk about what the work has actually looked like. But can you tell us how it all came about and what the significance of the name is?
Oh, should I go first? Okay. So the Black Wall Street in Tulsa, Oklahoma was the Greenwood District, and that's where the name Greenwood Week comes from. It is one of the most quote unquote popular instances of where America destroyed the success of Black people. It is not the only one. It is not the largest one, but it is one of the most violent, right? Like it is one of the most violent instances of America seeing, Black people profit and be successful and decide that it was going to take the side of, white Americans who did not like that. And we named it that because we kind of want to bring that back. Like, we're not going to give up on the idea that Black people can be successful in a space where only Black bodies are running businesses, where they are running the economic, where they decide what to pay, who to pay, when to pay, right? Like, we don't have that agency as Black people in America. Black people globally, a lot of the times, don't have that agency to decide when, where, who, and what to pay. Like, we don't have the access to a lot of Black businesses. We don't have the access to Black capital. So Greenwood Week is kind of the creation here in Pittsburgh of saying, we want to do that. We have the capacity to do that, and we want to teach people how to do that. And it came about because, we're kind of in the same position. Like, we are entrepreneurs who are looking for Black spaces. We are looking for Black people. We are looking for Black businesses. We are looking for Black entrepreneurs, and we are unable to find those type of people. Or if we do find those type of people, they don't have the capacity to handle any more work, or they don't have the staff, or they don't have the funding. Right? So we kind of encapsulated this whole week where it's just like, we're going to teach you, right? If you are about to start, if you are maintaining, or if you are successful, like, there's a part of Greenwood Week that is there for you as a Black person in business, not necessarily just a Black business owner, but if you want to do business, if you want to be well-versed on economics, that's what the week is for. It is for you to understand what type of system you are running, and whether or not you choose to run in that system is up to you. But we're here to give you the tools, because there's no dedicated organization, there's no dedicated person in the city of Pittsburgh that says, hey, we are here to right the systemic wrong of Black people being left out of economics. There are a lot of organizations that, they say we do economics, but you can't just say you do economics in a system that blatantly leaves out Black people all the time. Because if you run by that system, then it's automatically going to leave out Black people. You have to be intentional about saying, I need to fix this systemic wrong, and the wrong is to Black people. So if you don't say, hey, economically, I'm here to support Black people, then you're just going to be a part of the system.
Yeah,
sorry, I just wanted to kind of add to that, because in addition to creating these spaces for us, by us, part of what that means is we decide what the economic system looks like. Like, capitalism doesn't work for us. It works on the backs of us. So we can decide how we want to structure the economic system. We're not against economic growth. We're not against development. We are against gentrification. We're against exploitation. And we want to create systems that benefit Black people. Our historical context in this space is very relevant to the work we do. And it's very, it's a huge part of why we choose.
And it's kind of also an anomaly in Pittsburgh to see Black faces in charge of teaching Black people, right? Like all the time, whenever you go to different organizations and different programs, it's not culturally competent folks that are leading it. It's people who are economically versed, right? And it's not saying that those people are unable to teach. It's just saying that they don't necessarily have the wherewithal to explain it in a manner to somebody who has been downtrodden their entire lives, right? Like they have started from nothing, right? Like they don't have gifts of 50K. I think it's important to note that we use entrepreneurs, Black entrepreneurs who are currently working in those fields to teach you all it is that you need to know in a method in which you will understand, because they have not the exact same background, but they are empathetic to your background. They are empathetic to your plight so that you can understand, you can translate from your experience and bring that to economics. Because a lot of the times Black people are very much into economics, they just don't know the wording. They don't know how to translate what it is that they do. There's a lot of marketing geniuses, in Homewood that don't know that they're marketing geniuses simply because they did not have the understanding to say, hey, this is what quota means, right? Like they don't understand those terms that people are using to kind of confuse them. And, we're here to give them that kind of confidence with, like, you already know this, like you already know what it is that you're trying to say, but we're going to help you say that on paper so that when you go and you're trying to explain something to someone, they don't look at your resume and say, well, you spelled a word wrong, so you're obviously not fit to be in this position.
Yeah, it reminds me of when Nipsey Hussle was talking about Black men knowing that they're geniuses, but not having any platforms left for them to explain it. And here's a chance where not only is it creating that platform, but there's that translation, right? There's the folks that can resonate, that can relate, that can help walk through a process. So we've talked about the intention behind it, and we're sharing out two links for folks where they can learn more. And it says on your website that it's a minority business conference. Just a quick point of clarification: is it only Black focused, or other minority or marginalized groups as well?
It's Black focused. You can come if you like. We're not going to turn you away.
Black.
But you have to understand that when you come into this space, you cannot police what happens here. You do not dictate what happens here.
You do not censor yourself.
It is not about you. It is about the most marginalized people, aside from Native folks, in this area. That's what it's about. So you can come, feel free. But do not try to police or dictate what happens in this space.
Yeah, come as you are, but know what it is,
What it is.
Right. So you say it's a conference, and I know you've had like a week where there's a whole bunch of activity, but can you just break down for folks what the experience is like? Because I attended one of your sessions at Arnold's Tea in the North Side, and it was related to mental health. You had Julius Boatwright from Still Smiling coming and working with the entrepreneurs that you all were working with, talking about that and the importance of mental health with entrepreneurialism and the Black experience, et cetera. So break down for folks what the experience looks like if people are getting involved.
So let's just say this. When we put together Greenwood Week, it was both of our first time putting together anything of the magnitude. So there was some uncertainty. We weren't sure how it was going to turn out, how people would receive it. For myself, Greenwood Week blew my mind in more of a qualitative way. Like the way people received the intention that went into Greenwood Week, it kind of changed what I wanted to do and how much I wanted to do it. Like this was it for me. Like if I could make people feel seen and understood and empowered, like that's enough to sustain me for the rest of my life. Pay me though. I'm not saying don't pay me. I'm just saying that feeling of helping someone be seen who felt like they hadn't been seen before. People talked about how they had been to other conferences, they had been to business development centers, they had talked to people about the same information, but never received it in the same way as they did with Greenwood Week. Sam, if you have anything to add,
So I think I'm also on that front. I was pleasantly surprised, like of the quality that people were saying that they were getting that was like normal for us, right? Like me and Camille, we were just like, where would I want to go? What would I want to hear, right? And we just rebuilt that experience, and we didn't recognize that a lot of people just didn't have that experience, like from having a couch where families were sitting, like a woman sat with her 2 children to learn, right? People were asking specific questions and getting specific answers. Like we were giving out people's emails to organizations. They were like, are you allowed to do this? And it was just like, people don't give y'all, like, you should be able to pay money and go to a conference and get your questions answered. Like somebody shouldn't leave there and give you like motivational words like never give up. Like we don't need that as Black people. We need the pathways. Like you need to like give specific information as to how to go about these things. Like I understand, like there's a whole bunch of like motivational thing. Like I could go on Instagram and be motivated, right? That's not why I came to a conference. I came to a conference simply because I don't know how to do what it is that I'm trying to do. And if I ask you a specific question, I need a specific answer, or else I'm just going to be like, okay, well, don't give up. Like I don't want to leave a conference with just never give up in the back of my head, right? Like I need contacts. I need, where do I go to apply for a grant? Where do I go to get some insurance or insurance questions answered? You know what I'm saying? I think the conference itself was just so relatable to everybody else. And I think me and Camille didn't realize how much, like how relatable our experience was, because we are having the same problems. Like when we go to the conference, we also learn these things, right? Like we're in the classes because like these people, these professionals are like giving us, information that we needed too, right? So we're curating an experience that we want to have. Like we're not here to make money. Of course, pay us, but we're not here for the specific, like, okay, well, we need to make money. That's not our goal. We're not here to make money off the backs of Black people, because Black people are tired of that, right? Like we get the money to funnel into the Black communities so that we can be successful around other successful people, because it doesn't work if me and Camille come out of this and we're like, we did it, but what about everybody else who attended the conference, right? Like if you didn't come out with a whole bunch of contracts, if you didn't come out with contracts, money, like then the conference wasn't successful. It wasn't economically successful if it was only economically successful for Sila and Cocopreneur.
Agreed.
Sure. So you all are getting down, to the micro level. It's about like the basics of setting up, whether it's your tax ID, business plan, resume, all the way up to like ways to get funding and those conversations too. And to your point, it like really rang out. It's been something that a lot of people have been paying attention to and have like anecdotally have said they've gotten a lot out of. Can you speak to just even that one session with Julius and the mental health piece? How have you approached bringing like themes into the conversation? Been to plenty of conferences or conventions or seminars where it's about entrepreneurialism or economics, whatever the case may be, but it's not always folded in with these other topics like mental health. So can you talk about how you added extra value to the experience for folks that were going to be participating?
Yeah, we just catered it to the audience, right? And a lot of this we were able to pull from our own experiences.
Yeah.
I think that when you become an entrepreneur and you start to kind of fish for ways to do business properly, take the proper channels, make sure everything is set up, you keep hitting roadblocks because you don't know what you don't know. So for us, it was a matter of putting the things that we had learned in our journey in front of folks, saying, okay, these are things to consider. Have you looked into business insurance? Yes, you're a consultant, but what does that mean? Are you liable for certain things, right? Let's think about this. Even with mental health, this is something that, everybody should invest in their mental health, but for Black people in particular, I think that we have a special place in the mental health field where we need us. And if you're going into entrepreneurship, you probably have to be a little crazy. And I say that word jovially, but I think it takes a lot of balance. Being Black, maybe being a woman, maybe being a veteran, maybe being a parent, and being an entrepreneur all at one time, it's extremely difficult to balance your life. That mental health part is going to be important. So just thinking about the things that we experience, we were able to kind of put that into things. Like, again, just being able to relate to people on a human level was enough for us to be able to answer people's needs. And I think that kind of dictated exactly what we did and what we provided for folks.
And I think it's also important to note that, you know, historically, Black people have always been entrepreneurs out of necessity, right? Like always, like there's always somebody who has to cook food, repair shoes, be a mechanic, like a self-taught mechanic, because we have been excluded from places of learning and places of business all the time, right? So for us to be like in this space and not know what we're doing a damn good job of like providing for entire families, right? But if I think about it in terms of like just generational wealth, right? Like if your mother had, or grandmother, right? Like she was cooking for the entire neighborhood. If she had just known about capacity building, where would you be right now? Where would you be starting off your life, not, you know, behind the curve with economics, right? Like you would have understood several pieces of business and you would have started your children off way better than what you currently have. You know what I'm saying? So it's just, entrepreneurship is important, but knowing how to go about, you know, doing your business is more important, not just for you to be successful, but the rest of your family and the rest of your line to be successful as well.
And your community, right? So like when you build strong businesses within your community, this helps your community grow in a way that it's not just idealistic, it's very practical. Right. So when we talk about economics and you have businesses who pay taxes, you have families who have enough money to pay taxes to the city now has money for funding schools. This thing is way bigger than just, I want to start a business for myself to be prosperous. Like it is a matter of us helping ourselves, even though we shouldn't have to bootstrap. But, you know, I think it's people need to understand how all of this plays into Black growth and expansion in general, just like our growth as a people and in relation to where we have been in this country, like what has been done to us over time. I mean, even if you think about the timeline of what has happened to Black people in this country, we were enslaved for like 250 years. We went through Jim Crow, and then we went through segregation and the civil rights movement. And we've only been free on paper for about 60 years, but we still have the prison industrial complex, right? So now you have people with 400 years of a delay in their growth. Right? How do you jumpstart that? Aside from just leaving them alone and letting them grow and not sabotaging them. You know, so.
And yet the conversation when like for the purposes of Greenwood Week comes down to like the individual level of what folks can do to put themselves in a position. Let me just ask one more question about that, and then I'd like to get into your own individual entrepreneurialism stories. There's a lot of people like talk about the gig economy and like side hustle that folks have, and we know that a lot of our peers and just people in general in the city, but a lot of our peers do and have had side hustles. They're doing little things on the side for the web piece here, maybe some social media, maybe some whatever, you know, what have you. Are you all seeing that folks are doing that more? And are you seeing that folks that maybe have had that kind of going for a while are moving towards like the LLC phase and like to the business plan putting together like capital and teams phase? Like what is the space looking like in terms of what level folks are at on their entrepreneurial journey?
Sam, I don't know if you can speak to this more with, you know.
So I think people are losing that fear of jumping, right? So I think, you know, our social and governmental capacities have kind of instilled a fear into people about living outside of the 9-to-5 or outside of the support from the government, right? Like there's a lot of people who have that fear, like, how am I going to feed my family? How am I going to feed myself? How am I going to do all these things without the support of, you know, a system? And entrepreneurship kind of exists outside of that. And, so this might be controversial, but like, I don't believe in telling people who sell drugs to not sell drugs, because that is how they feed their family. Unless you have a solution for them to tangibly survive outside of that side hustle, you should not, you shouldn't be trying to, and I'm not saying that I support people who do that, but it's, you can't give people advice on how to live without providing them an opportunity to live outside of that side hustle that they do, right? And so
I just want to support what you said with just a point that poverty is the reason for a lot of these things. And when you put people in positions of poverty, they have to figure out a way.
And it's human instinct to survive. Like, it's human instinct to do whatever it takes to survive, right? And I think that's the important part of Greenwood. We don't vilify people who are in those positions. We provide them opportunities to say, hey, if you don't want to do this, if you don't want to do what you're currently doing, there is another way, right? Like, I'm never going to take food out of your mouth, money out of your pocket, because I understand what it's like to have 3 children and not have food, right? Like, I grew up in Jamaica, right? I know what hunger feels like. I know what it takes to be like, okay, I'm never going to let my children starve. I'm going to do what it takes. Like, that's the type of country that I'm from, right? So whenever you see people who are doing what it takes to feed their families, you should automatically think, how can I translate for this person to do this on a corporate level? Because what they're doing is learning the basics that people are being taught with degrees, right?
Sales, marketing,
like all of those
time, all of that stuff.
All of that, like managing employees, like all of that is being learned on the streets. And I am just here to tell you that you can translate that, right? Because that's what corporate America is doing. And they're paying somebody to do what it is that you're doing, buku amounts of money. And you can be able to access that.
Right. It's about the space that you can deploy those skill sets in. You know what I mean? Like, on a certain level, I like playing basketball, and when it comes to like the basic fundamental activities, I do the same thing as any one of these NBA players. They're shooting, they're passing. When I do it, I don't do it in a sphere where there's financial compensation. You know what I mean? But if you're at a certain level, there are places that, people will pay you to do that. And so it's about how do you leverage your skill set? How are you in an environment where that skill set can be fostered and encouraged? And then what are levels of support so that you're, activated to do that? I'd love to hear, and let me just put a final point on that. What you both do with the Greenwood Week is tremendous work. I put the link in the chat. I encourage people to check it out. Just in terms of my own personal story, I started doing like web design and like social media stuff a while ago, coming up in the nonprofit space, doing like Meals on Wheels and stuff where there wasn't a lot of money available, like via the organization, via the salary. And I found that there was like a need for nonprofits that wanted to have a presence online, but didn't know exactly how. And there were things like WordPress and stuff. So it was conversations with people that were a little bit further along that told me about how to get my tax ID number, what the difference between a sole proprietor and LLC was, how to set up like my own hosting setups that I could have websites hosted and have it all myself. That like really illuminated for me. And then I was able to then like Google and learn and watch YouTube videos to learn how to do X, Y, and Z. So I really encourage people to check out the Greenwood Week work and to the extent that they can, especially if they're interested in this kind of work, engage with Khamil and Sam because they're literally, I've seen it, like they walking through with individuals and families. I've seen kids like sitting on like the couch, like she was saying, in there just talking about these fundamentals. It's extremely valuable and it really helps demystify. And that translation piece is so important, just to be able to kind of translate that personal experience. So I wondered if you both wouldn't mind, and Sam, I'll start with you if it's all right, your own entrepreneurial journey, and how did SILA come about? And that's how you say it, right? SILA Pittsburgh?
SILA PGH, yes.
PGH.
So I don't even know where to start. The journey is still, I don't even know what phase I'm in, but like, I'm far from successful. But I was in the military, obviously. I I don't know why I said obviously. That doesn't make any sense. But so I was in the military, and I came back from Alaska, having served, and I tried to go to school, for hospitality because I thought I was like friendly and, I wanted to do that. But I realized it wasn't for me. So I realized that, I had to go through a lot of microaggressions. I had to like tame who I was simply to work in that space. Like I couldn't, there was one time I wore an afro to work and somebody was like, oh, that's too afro, like for here. And I was just like, I don't even know what that means. But I was just like, there has to be like a space where I can simultaneously be successful and be myself, because I see other people who are doing that, right? Like I see other people who are entertaining and things like that, but like I didn't want to entertain. So I was just like, how do I go about this? And like when I came back to Pittsburgh from serving and going to school, I was looking around a lot. I was talking about the things that were interesting to me, which was more so socioeconomics, right? Like it was the success of Black folks on a level not solely economic. So I went to Startup Weekend, and I pitched the idea of having events for artists to be able to make money. And, it took second place. And, I was developing like all of this, and I started reading. That's basically what it was. I started reading so much that I started to kind of put real life experiences into things and be able to like translate for other people, because I call myself sophisticated all the time, because like that's who I am. Like I'm from like the type of country where we like to cook out, like we like to drink, we like to go to hood bar, like we do those things, right? But I wasn't the face of Black success, and I didn't like that, right? Like I didn't like the fact that I had to change who I was to be successful. And so I started, telling people, like I started translating, basically. I started translating business and economics in a method in which I could understand, right? Like I remember I posted a status about people who sell drugs being able to work in corporate America. And it was so radical, quote unquote. But I started to realize that there were people out there that were just like me who wanted to be successul, but were not seen as success stories simply because they didn't wear suits, they didn't talk a certain way, or they did dress a certain way. So I wanted to kind of talk to those people. I wanted to be that person that people look at and be like, oh, I can actually do that. I didn't want to change who I was. I wanted to keep both. I wanted to have my cake and eat it too. And I just tried to figure out a way to do that. And that's basically how, I started getting contracts and things like that, because I was doing me while also being, a source of opportunity for other Black folks.
And you take a special focus in that work on artists, is that correct? How would you describe like the scene that's here in Pittsburgh, with the arts community and the artist business community too?
So I found that the gap between opportunity and access, like there's just a large gap between the marketing of Pittsburgh organizations, right? They assume that simply because you create a grant for Black people, that Black people are going to be able to get that, right? They don't take into account all the missteps that go into trying to find that opportunity, when the predominant amount of minority communities are living below poverty lines, or they don't have Wi-Fi access, or the majority of households don't have computers to be able to access that online grant, right? So I kind of see artists as being those ones kind of like me who are just like, I can't do paperwork. Like, I don't understand paperwork, or I don't understand how to go about writing a grant, even though I have the process in my head of how I would utilize this money. I don't know how to put a budget together. I don't know how to make my resume look like I am worthy of this grant. So kind of being the medium between these organizations that are, that require, this level of English language understanding to be able to communicate things, and people who are just like, I don't know how to say what it is that I'm trying to say. Like I completely accept and appreciate being, the medium between these organizations and these people and the artists that are trying to they're trying to meet each other, but they're not communicating on the same wavelengths.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, let's shine some light. Who are some artists that you've worked with that you think that you would encourage folks to check out and see, not just like their amazing work and what they do, but ones that are from an entrepreneurial perspective, doing things that would be interesting for folks to check out?
Everybody Black. Sorry, no. Okay, so
we'll stop. Thanks for taking the time, everybody. We'll sit down.
So I love Natik Jalil. I love everybody at the gallery on Penn. I don't know if anybody's ever been there, but we do the Fitty Art Show over there where, all the artwork is like $50 and under. Q Perry, we're opening a new art space in the Hill District that is Live Workspace. It's subsidized, supported by the Heinz Endowments. So if anybody's like interested in living in the Hill and doing art in the Hill, I'm always down for that.
That's
Natik,
great.
Q, I was going to say buy my book, but I'm not going to plug myself, but I'm also creative.
Oh, please do. Please do.
So I wrote a children's book for my son. So it's on Amazon.
With illustrations.
With illustrations.
Yeah, that's awesome.
But yeah, I'm kind of biased. I love Black people Black people who are creating, Black creatives, Black cultural workers. Like if there's somebody Black creating something, I automatically love it. And all they got to do is like ask and say, hey, how can I'm like, ready, let's go. Like,
yeah, it's really great work. Yeah. And if you go on the website, I shared 2 links to Sila PGH. You can see all the artists there and check it out. But I mean, even I have seen online, there's been, especially in the past like couple years, far more folks that I knew as artists, Black artists or community artists, where I'm starting to see like Etsy links. I'm starting to see like Wix websites or WordPress websites, and they're starting to put together like a portfolio, like different ways that folks can access them, see their work, appreciate it, pay for it, get some of it for themselves, and just generally support. So there's a lot of really great things to look at. And for folks that want to know how they might want to approach it, some cool blueprints on how others have tried it. Maybe Etsy's not right for you. Maybe it's an e-commerce site, and you just need a different kind of e-commerce site. And but you can figure all of that out. Khamil, I'd like to talk about Cocopreneur. Would you mind sharing about your entrepreneurial journey and how you came to that idea?
Sure. First, let's say Happy Boom Concepts Day. If we're talking about artists and creatives, they have an amazing gallery on Penn Avenue and Garfield. So if you want to check out art, always look to Boom because they generally lift artists up.
That's 2 Penn Avenue references that are dope for folks. The gallery on Penn, and shout out to Jasmine and to Tammy and all the rest, the folks there, but then Boom and Garfield as well. Super great. In fact, I'll put those in the links while you're talking about Coco.
Oh, and Ujima Collective.
Been doing work for 20-something years, dealing with Black creatives across the diaspora, like not just America, but across the Atlantic. Amazing stuff.
Amazing stuff.
Pittsburgh has really rich history. Y'all have to dig into this stuff.
And we're gonna do some more digging. Maybe we'll do another talk about that and just spend some time unpacking. Right. But anyways, sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, no. So Cocopreneur started, the idea originally started with what was called the Black Dollars Matter campaign, where we stamped money, not in a defacing way, but stamped it. And if you stamp this money, this represented money that you have dedicated to spend within the Black community, right? So it was this way to get people to visualize keeping the dollar in the Black community. What happened with that is while we had this campaign going, we didn't really have anywhere, like we had to show people where to go and give them reference for where to go. So then, tried to look up some directories around the city. The Pittsburgh Black Business Directory that had been active for like 30 years, started by Miss Connie Portis, was retired for about 5 years by 2015. So once I realized that, I decided to kind of bring back this directory. So I did a bunch of work in social media, sharing businesses. I started to compile just an Excel spreadsheet of listings. And once it hit a certain point, decided to put that onto a website where people could freely access the information. So the Cocopreneur directory went live February 2nd of 2019. That's my mother's birthday. And then this year it's in a beta version. So some new features have been added. There was recently an article written about how Black businesses do not get the benefit of Yelp reviews, and they don't benefit from having people come to their place, rate them on Yelp, and then have more traffic driven there. So one of the things that was added was a rating and review system on the Cocopreneur directory. So now ratings and reviews are available on the site, as well as operating hours for businesses. The work with Cocopreneur has also advanced through collaborations like Sam and myself with Greenwood Week. So doing more advocacy work, making sure that businesses have what they need and have access to information and resources in order to survive and thrive. What else is there? I don't know. The directory is kind of like the cornerstone, but really getting into this work of rebuilding Black communities, even if that means getting your hands completely dirty and doing it, right? So I created the directory, but what if people need help sustaining themselves? Yeah. Oh, you know what? I guess something else did happen.
Yeah.
So this year, after the protests for George Floyd's murder, there were some agitators into the Pittsburgh protests, vandalized a bunch of downtown businesses, 2 of which were Black-owned businesses. So once I saw that, I immediately decided to start a fundraiser to help them basically become whole, anything that maybe insurance didn't cover. So I started this Pittsburgh Black Business Relief Fund, which is still active and live now. But the point of that was to help them with any damages and repairs to their storefronts, cover inventory, and then start creating these decals that people could put in their windows to say, I'm a Cocopreneur, find me and rate me on cocopreneur.com, right? Because of the amount of money that the fundraiser has raised, I've actually decided to transition that fund, in addition to helping those businesses, into like a mini grant program. So with COVID-19 happening and all these business interruptions, people are probably going to have a hard time staying afloat. The moratorium on rent is now lifted. So businesses who have leases on storefronts, that rent's going to be due. People may have had inventory go bad because they weren't able to open. They're going to need new inventory. So now what the fund is going to do is help people just stay afloat until whatever monies can come through. PPP was very difficult for a lot of Black businesses to tap into. So I felt like it was necessary to create something that we could access more easily. And somebody who actually knows these businesses could say right away, okay, we can get you some funds so that you can pay your rent this month, or you can buy, food to cover this week's, menus, or whatever the case may be. So, Cocopreneur just keeps growing just based on the needs of the community. Like, I'm literally here to serve the community and all of their business needs.
And it's a great example of where working on developing one tool leads to other engagement opportunities. On its face, Cocopreneur is a directory of Black businesses, but now it's an engagement tool as well. And it allows you to speak about this in conversation. I've seen you, I remember being at the Kelly Strayhorn Theater, watching you talk about Cocopreneur in all kinds of different conversations. Can we just keep it there for a quick second? You mentioned how you started with an Excel spreadsheet, which I just want to emphasize, for folks. I think sometimes there's, I had a professor in college used to call it complexifying. And I think about this with entrepreneurialism a lot. Sometimes the burden of all the ways you could go about it can inhibit you from just getting started. And yet you started what's become a sophisticated product and tool with just like entries on a spreadsheet. And then you move it into more of a living a directory that folks can access via the internet. How did you go about figuring out like what platform to put it on, and how did you make those decisions?
It took a while. This is more of a personality trait. So for me, it's a little more like innate. I'm a busybody. And when I see something, I just start fidgeting and like looking things up and trying to figure out ways to make it work. So for me, I have to start. Like if I have an idea, I have to just jump in and start doing things, and then I'll figure it out as I go. That's not going to be the case for everybody. So it's hard for me to say, well, just jump in and start. For me, that's an easy thing to do. As far as figuring out how everything else worked, it took a while. So I started a fundraiser in 2018 originally for Cocopreneur. So I raised about $3,000 to get the directory started. And I was like, oh, great. Now I can pay for a developer, and then I can have them help me do yada, yada, yada. Right. And I kept hitting these brick walls. Like I kept looking up, how to start a directory, what platforms for a directory. And it took until August. So I started, that maybe happened in April. Around August, I had a conversation with my dad, and he reached out to one of his friends, and the person said something, well, they said what she's looking for is a web application. And the moment that I looked up web applications, I found exactly what I needed, right? So it was a matter of, not knowing what you don't know. Yeah. And once I knew what to search for, I kind of just hit the ground running. So once I found what I needed, I paid for domain space. I hooked up with a developer who could actually, who knew exactly what to do. They knew coding. I worked my 9 to 5 during the day. I came home to my family and had family time in the evening. And then at 9:30, we got to work on the directory. So that took a couple of months. Things really started to come to fruition about December. We actually had a website and it looked like something. And then it was just tweaking between December and February before we launched. But it took a while. Like it took a lot of digging. And I think that's something that people looking into entrepreneurship and problem solving have to get used to. The answers aren't always going to come right away. It's sometimes going to take time. You might have to sleep on things. You can't be afraid to ask for help. You can't be afraid to say, I don't know. Like, I don't know. Sometimes it's like, oh, I don't know what I'm doing, but I'll figure it out. Like, that's really what it comes down to.
I don't know what I'm doing. I do not know what I'm doing.
I'll figure it out, but right now I can't tell you. I don't know. And I think that being honest with yourself about those things is helpful. Like you're not, it allows you to at least make room to dig a little deeper or ask for help. When you can acknowledge, okay, I don't know what the hell I'm doing.
Yeah.
I need help. It allows you the room to actually reach out for help.
And it's not what you can face barriers and certainly frustration on not knowing, but it won't ultimately prohibit you if you can find a way to ask the right questions. And sometimes you can't entertain what those questions might be, and sometimes you don't find them until you acknowledge that I don't know where I'm headed. And that's where you can engage with counsel or someone that can say, hey, well, what about this? What about that? In your case, a conversation with your dad, they mentioned this term sticks out, you look it up and boom, it's right there. And I find myself, I'm curious what you all think about this. When folks want to get started with these things, I find myself encouraging them right away that there are tools out there that can help you. Now, they might not all be applicable to you, just like a toolbox. It might not always be that one that works for you, but there are tools, and whether that's WordPress, the things you can do on just like Facebook pages nowadays, a lot of folks can get started on what they want to do simply with a couple social media platforms. There are assets there for you. It's just about what works for you. And these things aren't set in stone. You could start with a Wix website, and then have a Squarespace website, and then have a WordPress website, and do all of that yourself, or with some help. And your idea can just continue, to evolve. And so I think it can be encouraging for folks because, how do I start when I got to learn how to code and all this stuff? It's like, no, really, I mean, if some of these tools, like if you're familiar with how to work just social media or like a word processor, you can work some of these platforms and get things started. So you mentioned that you were doing fundraising post-COVID, and especially in relation to Black businesses getting destroyed in some of the recent unrest. And that's a partnership with Inventrify, is that correct?
So Inventrify is Black founded by a man named Brandon Brooks. He is from the Pittsburgh region. His platform is basically like, I hate to use a competitor, but it's like GoFundMe, but specifically for businesses. So when you fundraise on Inventrify, people know that it is for you to grow your business. GoFundMe is like any type of ask that people might have. But Inventrify is specifically for people who want to raise startup capital for their businesses or some type of money for their businesses to go on. And it's basically in gift form, community raised. And I do want to make this really good point too, that the money that I raised before the Inventrify campaign for the Black Business Relief Fund was all raised from the community. Like the directory kind of belongs to the community. It's almost like a co-op. Like the people have put their money into fundraisers to make it happen. And that's why the directory exists, which is so hard to kind of, it's not even hard to come to terms with. It's just funny that the community is still bootstrapping when this tool is so useful to the entire region. So I think that's interesting. But I'm a solopreneur, but so many people feed into Cocopreneur and its success.
Yeah. Okay, wonderful. Well, we're almost up on an hour here. Let's bring the conversation to a close here. As we close, well, first let's start with just some fundamentals. Sam, we'll start with where can folks find information? We put a lot of the links in the chat already. Where would you encourage folks to find about the work that you're doing or anything else you'd like to highlight and mention for people that might want to learn more?
So I'm not really great at social media. Well, my business social media. So, I mean, my personal pages are more informational than my business pages simply because, like I'm one of those people where, you literally just send me a message and tell me what you need and then I'll work on it, right? Like for the past weeks, I've been helping people, apply for grants. The foundations have been asking where, who needs money? Where can we put our money? So like I've been doing, a lot of grant applications and things like that. A lot of strongly worded emails trying to get people money. So mainly, just email me or message me. I'm able to help you with certain things. I may not have the capacity to work on it, but I will find you somebody who would be able to help you. So just send me an email, use my personal Instagram or my personal Facebook to get in contact with me. That's the main way to find out, what it is that I'm doing, who needs help. That email.
Perfect. Thank you, Sam. And Khamil?
Social media, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter is just Cocopreneur PGH. So COCOAPRENEUR PGH. If you want to contact me directly, feel free to email me at Khamil, KHAMIL @cocopreneur.com.
Khamil, I meant to ask you about the recent partnership with the URA, because I saw that it got announced that you all were getting some investment there. Could you tell us very quickly about how that all came about and what that'll be used for?
Oh yeah, so the URA in conjunction with Citizens, they donated $15,000 to the Black Business Relief Fund, simply because that's work that they do generally, and they figured, rightfully so, that you should look into partnering with grassroots organizations who already do the work that you have in your initiatives. Mm-hmm. And it was kind of as simple as that. So, I think that's a step in the right direction. And the more of that they do, I think the more effective they will kind of be going forward.
Thank you. And I'm putting in the chat information about that, and also the work that the URA does related to minority and women-owned business enterprise, because there's been more and more funding put in that direction, and might be just some additional resources for folks. There was also a very robust local philanthropic community here, and then also these fundraising tools that have been pointed out. Okay, let's bring it to an actual close. Just final encouragements from you two to folks that may be watching that are on their entrepreneurialism, on their business, on their just community journey. What on Juneteenth in 2020 would you say to them to close us out?
I'm going to speak from just a human level. Please continue to lift each other up. I think this is also a good indication or a good representation of what should happen. Even though you're an organization that deals in work for men and boys, showcasing 2 Black women is important, right? I think that we can continue to empower each other to be great and encourage each other to tap into those things that, make us gifted. Like we're all gifted in something. So I think it's just a matter of tapping into what our gifts are, cultivating them, and encouraging each other through that.
Thank you so much. Sam?
Support Black businesses. Your dollar is very, very, very important. And you purchasing from somebody like Natural Beauty Supply, so that she can be able to, afford a house in the neighborhood where the property taxes, like Camille said, the property taxes will go to the education system that completely benefits your children. Support local Black businesses, but support local Black businesses, because I guarantee you there's a Black business that is able to meet your standards if that's what you're looking for. Find a product that you already use, replace it with a Black business, and give Black businesses room, because a lot of Black businesses don't have the tools or the education to know how to maneuver within business. So give them room to fail sometimes, and that's pretty much it.
Well, thank you both so much for your time, and we will look to continue to bring conversations like this to this channel, and to walk the walk ourselves, use the platforms at our disposal to have better conversations about life and about ways to move forward. I really just encourage anyone that might be watching, to check out Khamil and Sam online and learn more about the work that they do. I think they're really inspirational stories, but the way that they approach it, you're going to find they're pointing constantly to other people, what they're up to, how you can help, success stories, and just general good vibes. So thank you again to both of you for your time. For all of you that may be watching, please take the best care of yourselves, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.